All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. Hello, I am Vanessa Hutton, and we are going to go through a grief management session. So thank you for joining me. I'm just going to get right started and just jump into it here. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint. There we go. So the focus of our session today are various topics and tips that are going to help you to learn to find peace after the loss of your child. And again, I just want to say thank you for joining me. I really am so excited to be sharing this information with you. My excitement will probably grow as I move through this presentation because it has been a long 15 years. My son passed 15 years ago, so I'm Vanessa Hutton. I call myself the well-being being. My son Lucian and my son Flynn, they fancy themselves YouTubers. And when I told them what I was doing, they helped me come up with the name. My son Lucian, he said that everything I came up with was boring, but he liked this one. So the well-being being. I really do believe that sometimes you just have to focus on your well-being one day at a time and get to wherever it is that you're going, which will be a better place. So I'm also a licensed clinical counselor with a trauma and crisis specialty. I really wanted to understand, the why of it and seeking the answers. And so I love my job. I just love my job. I work with people who have anxiety, PTSD, depression, chronically, and the root of it always is trauma. So I want to talk and always will love to talk so much about trauma. I could talk about it for hours. So my hope with this workshop is that you will begin to take small steps to learn to manage your grief. And my big picture goal with the work that I do always is to help people to find peace and to live with joy as the years pass. But I want to help people to do it faster than I did. It took me a really long time because I was quite alone with all of it. And I don't want you to be alone. I want you to have a map. So trust me, trying to figure out all of this on your own is utterly exhausting and crazy making, let's face it. So to get through my grief, I wrote. That's one of my go-tos when I need an outlet. So I eventually wrote a book or put it together as a book. And my book is called My Journey into Bereaved Parenthood, Strange, Changed, and Rearranged, My Journey into Bereaved Parenthood. So the first part I call strange because that was the part where everything was so strange for me. And I'm sure you can relate after your child dies. Everything feels so strange. And then the second part I called changed because everything about my life and who I was felt changed, and I had to learn to live with that. And the third part is called rearranged because at that point I felt that parts of myself came back to merge with the new me, but everything was really quite rearranged. So, and in the third part, when things were rearranged, that's when I really started to thrive. So another way that I'll talk about it is I'll say, first you survive, then once you've survived, you sort of feel like, wow, I survived that. I think I want to learn to thrive. And then once you start to thrive, you start to feel like, oh, superhero, wow, I can do anything. And then I really just wanted to come alive in my life after that. So this is sort of the background in my book. It takes you through my journey. And for me, the turning point was when I began to develop a relationship with my son on the other side. I was really lost before I had that foundation. And I was lucky enough to encounter a really good medium with the spiritualist church. And I had contact, and it really changed everything for me. And I write about that in my book. So I want to talk about an experience I had at work the other day that just confirmed to me the importance of understanding where you're going with your grief. And so this for me is the story of the unicorn. I call my colleague the unicorn because I've always felt like I don't know who could ever lose their child and function. Like it just hit me like a ton of bricks and totally broke me. I couldn't function. I had the foggiest brain. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go out. And so I met my colleague at work, and before I knew that she'd lost her daughter, she was sharing in our in our check-in about what she was doing on the weekend, how she was going out to, and I sent this as a video that I sent out to people as well with this story of my colleague, the unicorn. And so she was talking about, bringing in the fish. She's First Nations, and she was bringing in the fish with her daughter from her son, with her granddaughter from her son, and they're processing it. And she was just really feeling the joy of getting the smokehouse going and describing her granddaughter being up to her eyeballs in fish and just radiating this love of life that I was kind of like envious of, but yet inspired by, because I know that I felt that in moments, but I want more of that, come alive feeling. So then fast forward to a couple weeks later, and I learned that 6 months ago, her daughter has passed. And I'm flabbergasted, like just flabbergasted, because I was a shell of myself for a year after my son passed. And I think that's one of the more common things that people tell me, is that first year is really just quite awful. So I sat down and had a conversation with her that just really, I was asking her, like, how are you able to do this? And she started explaining how the foundation of her culture and her heritage and all of the rituals and the things that she knows to do are really helping her to find her way. And so it's not that she isn't feeling the physical pain. It's not that she isn't going through the difficulty of the loss. It's just that she has a roadmap to guide her. So then she feels hope that she's going to get to a better place. She knows how to deal with what she's dealing with, and she's got ideas about how to get there. And I think that that's the commonality that I learned in my conversation with her is that I sort of serendipitously found these things that she so naturally was given through her culture. The permission to have a relationship with her child on the other side. In fact, a whole series of rituals around developing that relationship that then support her in her grief process. And so to me, that was the unicorn moment where I really realized that knowledge about what to expect and what to do really is the secret. It's the secret weapon to finding your way to a more peaceful place and to really knowing that you can manage your grief and that you can do this. So this workshop today is for everyone who has the courage to take small steps daily. Anyone. It's for bereaved parents who struggle to find a way to manage their grief. I don't know if there's a bereaved parent that doesn't struggle, and that's why I say the unicorn, right? I mean, my colleague, she admitted in a conversation that it's not that she doesn't struggle with it, it's just that she has a method of dealing with the struggle. So this workshop is for people who wonder if healing from grief is even possible. So it's for any bereaved parent, regardless how old your child was when they passed or how long it's been since they passed. And it's for bereaved parents who are seeking hope in their grief. That's one of the things that I hope that I can, just inspire in you is to know that you can do this. So, and it's for people who are courageous enough to believe they have that they can and to believe and have the desire to heal. Because some bereaved parents don't. I've experienced in this short journey with trying to and desiring to help people online is that a lot of people are just totally against it. Like they don't want to let go of their grief. And I understand that, but at the same time, I wasn't able to do that myself. I really found that, like I say, once I survived, I wanted to thrive. Once I was thriving, I wanted to come alive. I felt like all these skills that I gathered were so useful, and they helped me to have a better and better experience of life without my son. So I told you at the beginning that I'm a licensed clinical counselor, and so I have a love of research and data, and I have done quite a bit of research around grief and loss related to bereaved parents. And so I wanted to share, I feel it was surprising to me because the data feels to me very powerful, and it isn't really great news. I mean, the research and the stats at a glance, the bad news is that cardiovascular issues are common, which means that a broken heart is one of the things that we literally die from. Anxiety, PTSD, depression, common. Time passes, we don't necessarily heal. So in the first 3 years, women are more likely than men to be hospitalized, and there's no shame in that. if you need to get to the hospital, because another thing that's common is people feel very suicidal. And so I would encourage anybody who's in that place where they feel suicidal and hopeless to just get to a place where you can get help and stay safe and survive until you get to a better place. So a lack of social support increases a bereaved parent's chances of experiencing PTSD and chronic grief. Bereaved parents have increased risks of mental health problems, increased risk, like I say, for death due to cardiovascular problems. The hard reality, intrusive thoughts are common for as long as 5 years after the death of your child. 70% of parents who lose a child will report PTSD symptoms. Bereaved parents have an increased rate of mortality and higher rates of suicide attempts. So like I say, this workshop is for people who are in a place where they want to learn about the course and the trajectory. And I just want you to know, if you do get to that place where you feel suicidal, then you get yourself to if you're in Canada, you get yourself to the ER. And I don't sure what the process is in the United States. I know you call the suicide hotline if you can, but please don't feel ashamed of feeling suicidal. We all go through that. So it's quite normal, and you need to get the support that you need right away if you're in that situation. So the good news is around being a bereaved parent that peer support helps with anxiety and PTSD symptoms. So Facebook groups, compassionate friends, people who understand, they're really important things for you if you're experiencing the anxiety and the depression. So staying focused on restoring your life by accepting your changed identity also increases well-being. So there's a new me that happens. You lose a sense of who you were before, and that new person that you are becoming or that you're faced with dealing with, the more that you're able to embrace your new you and your new reality, the more you're going to feel happier in your life, is what the research suggests. So the other really cool thing to me is that eventually bereaved parents learn what we call effortless self-regulation. So it's like you've been through so much, you've handled so much that it becomes second nature, and in stressful situations, you just are beautifully able to manage yourself. So that's one of the reasons why I think that bereaved parents are, in fact, the silent superheroes of our society. The things that we deal with are incredible, and the fact that we come out the other side stronger is amazing. And that's what the research suggests, that we come out the other side stronger. So, how do you do that? How do you get there? And that's what I want to talk about more today. I also am going to talk about throughout this session a workshop that I'm offering for people. And I've got a wait list that I'm gathering names for. I'd like to have a certain number of people in the group, because the group is part of, like I say, the peer support is part of an important part of being successful. And so if we can have a workshop and connect with people, I want there to be a lot of people in there to connect with, so that you can make some friends to help you out along the way. So what we're going to cover today is grief and trauma, the timeline for healing, family and friends, anxiety, depression, and PTSD, anniversaries and birthdays. Okay. And with each one of these topics, I want to really stress that it's going to depend on where you're at, how long it's been since your child passed. So I'm going to try and offer a range of tips and strategies for everybody. For the people who are more freshly bereaved, as I said, the more what I would call strange. And then the more, anyways, I'll talk about that more with the timeline for healing. But I just want to stress that as we're learning to manage our grief changes. And then we have to learn new techniques to manage our grief, depending on where we're at and how long it's been since our child passed. All righty. So let's get into it. Grief. Okay. Before we get into it, I want to be clear with everybody. The research confirms it's not, so time passes. That doesn't necessarily mean that we heal. So the healing that we do is intentional as bereaved parents. So, but hiding your head in the sand and just kind of buckling up and saying like, oh, I'm just going to let time pass. That's not the secret. The secret is you have to be actively able to do, like I say, small things to help yourself as the time passes. So that's what I want to help you to do, is to figure out the small things that you can do that'll lead you to other small things, and eventually you'll get to a different place out of the small actions that you're taking. Any change like that you're going to make, that's lasting in life, I really believe, results from the tiny steps that you take. So with respect to grief and trauma, what I really want you to understand is that grief is a trauma, and that trauma changes people, and that oftentimes the result of the change is anxiety, is depression, is post-traumatic stress. Like, this is what trauma does to our brains. So you've been traumatized, and so your neurons in your brain have kind of rewired themselves to a different place. They say neurons that wire together fire together. So these trauma neurons, they did this whole bunch of wiring together or firing together, and now they're wired together, and you've got this often what looks like an overstimulated fight, flight, or freeze response. So you can be anxious, right? Or depressed, frozen, oh, numb. That is totally a trauma response that can look like, oh, it's depression. Well, yeah, it does look like depression. Grief looks like depression. Grief looks like anxiety. Grief looks like PTSD. It looks like all of those things balled into one, because in fact, it does carry all of those elements because of the nature of what it does to your brain. Remember, I said I was going to start to get more and more excited as I was talking. This is like, I have a trauma and crisis specialty. This is my jam. I get so passionate when I'm talking about it, and I could talk about it for hours, which is why I hope you'll join me in the 5-week workshop when we can really get into the nitty-gritty of it and look at your own trauma response and figure out how we can help you to rewire your brain to a better place so you're not anxious all the time, and that you're able to get out of that depressed mood if that's what it looks like for you. Because remember, like I say, the freeze response is the numbness, the lack of wanting to do anything, the like total lack of desire to go out. And you can have it all, the anxiety, the grief, the PTSD. Like I say, it's very, very much a normal part of your grief experience. And I just want you to really hear me when I say that. There's nothing wrong with those things accompanying your experience. And any good professional will be able to help you with those things if they understand that the grief has been a trauma to your brain, and that with the emerging research around neuroplasticity, you've had a rewiring and it leads to the brain fog. But before we talk about the brain fog, I want to talk about our negativity bias. Human beings, evolutionarily, we have a negativity bias. And this negativity bias is how we have kept ourselves safe in the past. You know, when people were hunters and gatherers, like, they had to be in tune with their environment, and their negativity bias let them figure out like what things were different, or if they had an experience that really made a mark, it would then give them that anxious feeling if that experience came up again, as a way of keeping themselves safe, right? So you know where I'm going with this. So the loss of your child has like hyper stimulated your negativity bias. So you're on hyper alert, and you're looking, you know, for your brain, not you. Your brain is automatically sort of on hyper alert, trying to keep you safe, because you've ultimately come to a place where the loss of a child makes you feel so unsafe in the world, right? Like, it fundamentally is really such a blow, such a blow. So all this leads to this brain fog that a lot of people experience in the first year, maybe the first 2 years, where you just can't quite think right, can't put ideas together, don't care, apathetic. Like, brain fog is real. And it's, like I say, it's related to the trauma and what the trauma has done to your brain, right? So it causes physiological changes in your brain due to issues of neuroplasticity. Alrighty. So they say in the research that losing a child is considered one of the top 5 worst things that you can experience as an adult. And this is what I love. I don't know. I looked. What are the other 5, right? They liken it to war. They liken it to those sorts of really intense global crisis situations, right? But there's nothing else that they liken it to. And there's no list where they say, these are the other 4. So I just want to put it out there that losing a child is people's worst nightmare. I mean, you know how people get when you talk to them about the fact that you've lost a child. They'll start to act like it's freaking contagious. Right? Like, oh my God, they don't know what to say, or they're just like, you can feel how relieved they are that that's like, you have to deal with it and not them, right? And so what people say to you after you've lost a child can be pretty horrendous. And that's why I want to offer this workshop to people, because, you know, we need to talk about these things in a real way. And in the workshop, we can go deeper around that. But if you're hearing horrendous things, I just want to reassure you that that can be very, very normal. And depending on where you're at in your timeline, the way that you receive those comments also is different. So, all right. So I'm going to give you some tips now for dealing with brain fog. I'm maybe going to move this little picture of me. Oh, don't mess with anything, Vanessa. Just keep on going. So tips for dealing with brain fog. Write things down. Simple thing to do. Avoid multitasking. You know, multitasking is passé. You don't need to multitask. Do one thing at a time. Slow down if you have brain fog. Just slow her down. And stay hydrated because your brain needs that water. And when you're in that brain fog, you can often forget to take care of yourself, right? So I also want you to just be extra kind to yourself, right? When you have this brain fog going on, beating yourself up and saying like, oh, I did it again, or all of that negative self-talk is not going to help, right? The other thing that you can do that is helpful is let your people know that you have this brain fog as the result of the trauma related to the grief. Heck, let them watch that segment that I just did on grief and trauma so that they can really understand. So the other thing I want you to do is I want you to lower your expectations of yourself. It's going to be important that you are kind, like I say, lower your expectations, slow it down. The brain fog will go away. I'm so proud of myself that I did my master's degree. After my son died, I thought to myself, like, am I ever going to be able to think again or do anything again? I was such a mess. So, which is why my colleague impresses the heck out of me. So the timeline for healing. So this is something that I think is really important to understand, is the timeline and how it affects the way that you're going to deal with, you know, what's going on in your life related to your grief. So the first year, it's shock. You know, it's shock essentially as a result of this trauma that you've been through. Often people are just presenting as a shell of themselves. And in that first year, you face all of the firsts, right? Like the first birthday, the first Easter, the first Christmas, all of the firsts. And it is a very difficult year. And I'm not going to lie to you, you know, I'm just going to say to you, in that first year, your focus needs to be simply on surviving, feeding yourself, keeping yourself hydrated, surviving, you know, keeping your living children alive if you have kids that are alive still and you need to care for them. Like, that first year is going to be a tough year first and a tough year of feeling really out of sorts. And I know myself, I thought in the first year, like, I'm going to get through this first year because the second year is going to be better, right? So the bad news is that the second year can be harder because what happens is the shock wears off and you expect it to be better, but then it isn't. You're changed. Nothing's the same. You don't get to go back to who you were, and the landscape of your life is entirely different. And you've been in shock for a year. So maybe some things about your life have gone neglected and you wake up to it and go, oh. And also in the second year, I think, is when we become really kind of like aware that we need to hide our pain and maybe start to get good at hiding our pain. So I think at the 3 to 5 year mark is kind of where people will start to say that things lift, that you start to feel lighter. And why I say 3 to 5 years is because that'll depend on the social support that you have in your life. Honestly, like, if you have people in your corner who are really validating your experience and normalizing what you're going through, you're going to get there faster. If you've got people in your corner who don't understand and you're letting them kind of like beat you up over your inability to get over it, and you're internalizing their idea about how you're supposed to heal, you're going to take longer. Trust me, that was my experience, okay? So I don't want that to be you. I want to validate and normalize your experience, because it is normal to be at the 3-year mark and to still be in a good deal of pain, the 4-year mark, the 5-year mark. It happens. That's it, you know, it's a very deep loss, and it takes us a long time to digest it. So in the 3rd year, though, for me, that was when things started to feel a little bit better, not so difficult all the time, less pain, less anguish. I was more able to embrace my healing actively at this point. So then the 5 to 10 year mark is often where bereaved parents start to really feel the effects of the hard work we've been doing around our healing, and peace is more common at this point. In the 3 to 5 year mark, you might get the peace, but not know how you get it. And then at the 5 to 10 year mark, you might know, like, yeah, this is what brings me peace and I'm going to chase it, would be the difference, right? So at that point, a lot of bereaved parents choose to start helping others because helping others is actually what makes them feel good. So it's because I think what happens is because of what we've been through, we start to really know what's important in life and get really real about what's important in life. You still miss your child, and that's where I think what happens in the early years is we mistake our grief. Like, our grief is all we have left of our child, and we really want to hang on to that grief because it somehow feels like we're hanging on to them. And then, if we allow ourselves to, we can come to a place where we realize that our grief isn't our child, that we can let go of that grief, but that we can still really have that relationship with our child. And that's what, my conversation with my colleague at work really confirmed to me, because what she was saying was that, exactly that her grief was different, that painful place. And that she was developing a new relationship with her child, and that was a beautiful thing. And she wanted to be able to really honor that and make space and room in her life to be in love with that process as well. So the 10-year plus, I think for me and from the research, it suggests, things are generally easier, particularly if you've done the work. You're more free from the effects of the loss. Like I say, you'll still deeply miss your child. That doesn't go away. You can look forward to carrying that with you and really releasing the pain, I think, and just really carrying that. I miss my child, but that's different than the grief, the anxiety, the depression, those things. And that's the separation for me. My hope, right, is that you'll know the way through better through working with me, watching my videos, in the Facebook group, all of that over the years that you'll have the capacity to live your life with joy again. And I really do find that to be one of the best gifts, is that I know myself now. I know what I like. I know, and I find such joy in the simple things. And I'm able to really connect with the beauty of life. And the other bonus is, like, my coping skills are so awesome. And I know that to be true. I had the misfortune on October 31st last year of finding the man that I've been dating for the last 4 years, who I really love. He's just such a beautiful man and such a gift in my life. I miss him so much. And I was just aghast. I found him passed away in his home, and it was a really hard experience. And I was just so thankful to be who I am, because I know how to deal with it. I know what to do, and I'm not destroyed over it or broken. I go to my places where I need to grieve, and I know how to do that. There's an art to it, and so that's where I resonate with what the research says, that you get to that point where, when you've done the work and you've learned your way through, that you really can deal with anything, and that the coping mechanisms that you have lead to this sort of effortless dance with life, where, stressful things are happening, but you're not at the effect of the stress, because you know what's important in life. So that's my, my overview of the timeline. And the thing I want to also say is that, for me, the way that I deal with anniversaries and birthdays, it changes depending on where I'm at with the timeline. The way that I deal with the crying changes depending where I'm at on the timeline. The way I deal with my anxiety has changed depending where I'm at on the timeline. And so things will change as you move along. So now we're going to talk about family and friends and what to expect. So I wish I had better news. I honestly do wish I had better news. And so I want to just let you know that in the workshop, in the 5-week workshop, when we talk about family and friends, what we're going to talk about is how to improve our success with that area. Because I think there's things that we can do also that can really encourage our family and friends to know that they're enough in supporting us, and also things that we can do to really recognize who's going to play ball, sort of like who's going to be able to make that transition to be more supportive, and who just doesn't have it in them. So this is what I want to say in this little session is that your family and friends are really going to struggle to understand your loss because they don't know. They just don't know. And you wouldn't really want them to, right? Because the only way that they'll know what you're going through is if they go through it themselves. So it's like the catch-22, right? Like, I don't want someone to know how I feel. I'm sorry that you know how I feel. Like, I wish that you weren't on this in this session. I wish you didn't have to watch this. I wish that you didn't lose your innocence. Like, but that's not the case. Nobody asked. So here you are. You need to, like me, figure out how to deal with it, right? So, some family and friends might understand better than others, and consider yourself lucky if you have that and really appreciate that, and be grateful. Because it's a gift if they do even try, and if you're able to feel that they're trying, wow, nice work to your family and friends. So often the reason that things go sideways with our family and friends, I think, is because we're expected to be recovered from the loss more quickly than we're able to be recovered from the loss, right? Like, I want to be better. And that was the thing that started to make me feel really ashamed as the years passed, right? Was like, I wasn't better, and I didn't know how. Like, if I could have known what to do, I would be like, yeah, I'm on it. But I had no idea, no rituals to support me, no groups. It was before the time of Facebook, I think, or maybe I wasn't on Facebook or whatever. But it was just like, it was so lonely for me. And I was 30 years old. Like, that's not a common thing for a 30-year-old to be dealing with, particularly not, like, I live in a small town, right? So I started to feel like people didn't want to be around me, like I was somehow bad luck because I'd lost my baby. Um, oh my God, right? So you need to decide who's supportive in a way that you find helpful, right? Because some people think they're being supportive, but they're not, because they're saying things like, oh my God, you're so lucky you had another baby. As if having another baby somehow makes it okay that I lost my son. Like, it's not like I dropped my apple and my apple got bruised and dirty. And, oh, here's another apple, no, it's not. Anyway, so, people who aren't, what am I trying to say? I'm just trying to say it's okay. Like, if people aren't supportive and you don't feel it's supportive and you go home and you're stewing over the stupid things that they've said to you, it's okay. It's okay to cut them out. It really is. Like, they don't understand, and you need to really just, like, be okay with aligning yourself with people that even give you an inkling of feeling understood, right? Because the hard reality is that we often lose friends, and that's what I see time and time again in the Facebook groups, is that people get so hurt that they just can't stick with certain friendships anymore. So it's okay. You lose some, you'll get more, right? And that's why like I said, why I feel like I want to have a lot of people in the workshop, because I want people to connect in the workshop and make friends and be able to really, like, reach out to people and to have that feeling of I'm making dinner and I feel like I'm out of sorts, but I know, like, Ashley's out there and she's out of sorts too. And I know, that Patty's out there and Patty's out of sorts too. And Sharon's out there and Sharon's out of sorts too, but they're all doing it. And I know that they're doing it. I know their kids' names, and just that connection, making new friends is going to be an important part of getting your way through this. So I want, as much as I can, connect people, and help people to make those friendships. So, because often we find we have no one to talk to and no idea what to do to help ourselves, is the reality. So, and as promised, I wanted to make sure to give you guys some tips when I'm giving you bad news. So these are my tips for dealing with family and friends. Limitations, people have them. You want to be aware of people's limitations. Like, if you have a friend that you're just never ever going to remove from your life, and their limitation is like that they can't be there for you right now, then you have to be okay with that and find someone who can be there for you, or find people that can be there for you, right? So I was alluding to this before, and I want to really encourage you to protect your fragile self. You are fragile right now. Please, please, please be kind to yourself. Protect that fragile self. Don't stick yourself in situations where you're going to hear stuff that you're going to stew on and feel brokenhearted after, or about after, when you go home. please don't do that. I did a lot of that when I just, like I said, I had nobody giving me permission. And everybody just telling me like, oh, get out there, go socialize, do things, blah, blah, blah. And that wasn't the path for me. That was not the path for me. And every time I would try to do things when other people would just tell me that that was what I needed to do, it would just blow up in my face. And then I would isolate even more, right? So protect yourself. Don't be taking advice from people who haven't lost a child. That's also a big tip for me, from me to you, right? Align yourself with people who seem to understand, or even better, who do understand, right? So this is the thing. If you haven't gone yet, go to the compassionate friends nearest you. If you can, do it. Make a commitment for 6 months. Just tell yourself like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to like it, but I don't know what to do. I'm so alone. I have no one to talk to. I feel like crazy. I'm going to the compassionate friends. Just do it. Make yourself do it for 6 months. And I want to tell you a story about the compassionate friends. So I was like that. I made a 6-month commitment. And every month I would be like, oh, I don't want to go. And then I would go. And then after the 6 months, I started to realize that I had to go. Like I wasn't going to give that up, because it was like date night for me with my child. It was like one night a month where I was really able to have permission to be all about Luther. And so I would know that day, like, okay, I'm going, right? And I would be nervous, right? Like, I don't want to go. Nobody wants to go, but you need to go, right? So I would get nervous, but it would also be like I would look forward to it in a weird way. And so it's date night, right? Like, here we go. I've got your picture, and then we would all place our child's picture on a table, and we sit in a circle and we talk about how we're doing and get to hear about how other people are doing, which then normalizes and validates your experience. You don't have to share if you don't want to, which makes it a safe place. And then at the end, the sweetest thing, you stand in a circle and you hold hands and you say, I come here for Luther. And I can still hear it. Like, I come here for Jody. I come here for Nathan. I come here for Greg. I come here for Melissa. Just like, anyway, it started to feel like my son had a posse of friends, kind of like hearing his name spoken aloud. I come here for John Kim. Like, I still remember the sound of their names, and just like the love that my girlfriends would speak their child's name with, and the longing, like you want to say their name. God, you want to hear their name. Anyways, like I say, go to the compassionate friends. You won't want to, but just make that commitment to yourself. Give yourself that gift. Try it out, and don't just try it once, right? We all agreed that we never wanted to go. We went for like 7 years, this group of us. And so I didn't want to go. Every time I'd be like, no, I don't want to go. And then I would go and I would be relieved that I went. And we would always talk in the meetings about how we didn't want to come tonight. So there you go. I hope anyway, my storytelling, I hope that helps you. So with back to family and friends, and I've got another story to go along with this one. So I want you to let people know if they do something helpful. So here's a story. My girlfriend, one of my best friends from high school. This is the story, right? Is like that story I told you earlier about how I didn't want to answer the phone. So I stopped answering the phone because I couldn't tell people, and I felt ashamed, right? Like I couldn't say I was okay, and they didn't want to hear how I was. So I was like, forget it. I'm not going to answer the phone anymore. Nobody wants to know anyways, right? So I just stopped answering the phone. And then my girlfriend started leaving me like really nice messages. And then that sort of made me feel guilty, right? So the next time she called, I answered the phone and she said, how are you doing? And I cried and I said, I'm not doing very well. I'm still really, really struggling. And I feel like I'm letting everybody down because I'm not able to like answer the phone and tell you how great I'm doing. And then she cried and she was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm making you feel that way. That's fucking terrible. She's like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, I don't know what to do either. And then I said to her, but your messages always make me feel good. And she said, well, how about if I just leave messages, and then you call me when you feel like you want to talk. She's like, because you're on my mind all the time, but I don't know what to do. I want to call. I don't know when to call. And so then I told her like, your messages, they really make me feel good. And so she just would leave messages like telling me about what she's up to and telling me about how she's feeling about me and thinking about me. And and how she misses me and that she knows that I'm having a hard time. Like just whatever was in her heart, she would leave in a message. And this was before texting and that anyway, so that worked, and I let her know, and she and we still are friends today. And I wasn't sure if we were going to make that transition or if she was going to be able to stay, because it got so awkward, like I say, and I wasn't able to answer the phone anymore, and I felt like I was letting her down. And anyways, so I hope that you can, figure out things that people are doing right and let them know that. And I want you to also just remember, in dealing with your family and friends, that you're not alone in feeling misunderstood. Like, it is super common for us as bereaved parents to feel alone. And so just reach out in the Facebook group, particularly if you're a member of my Facebook group, Support for Bereaved Parents. It is a fantastically positive group of people. I purposely made my ad like, like some people get really mad, and I get a lot of mean comments that are like, I'm never gonna get over the loss of my child, how dare you. But I want that. I only want people in that Facebook group who want to get better, because they know they've got something at stake for it, right? Like I feel my heart breaks for people who are broken because of the loss of a child, and I totally understand that that is an easy place to go to. So there's no judgment or no shade from me at all towards the people. But what I want to say is that in my Facebook group, the requirement is, positivity, support, and love. Like, we don't care, you believe in God, you don't believe in God, you want to see a medium, you don't want to see a medium. We don't care. You've lost your child. There's like, you will experience the love and positivity. And particularly when somebody is in a painful place and they have the vulnerability and the courage to share that vulnerability in an authentic way. Oh my God, it is so beautiful. Like, so I just want to say, no, you're not alone in feeling misunderstood. And when you feel misunderstood, reach out to people who do understand. Join my Facebook group. Share with us there. You won't regret it. Okay. That was just a little bit of like me practicing being salesman-y, because I'm not some kind of slick online marketer person. I'm just like, my kids are playing video games right now. Okay. So now I want to talk to you about my favorite topic ever, right? Is anxiety, PTSD, and depression. So why are these my favorite topics? Because I have a trauma and crisis specialty, and because I'm a research nerd, and because I get super excited about my job. So, and that's what I know, right? Is like, all of my clients have this anxiety, PTSD, or depression, whatever it is, whatever cocktail they like whatever cocktail they're on, they get their referral from the psychiatrist, and then they come in my door. And I know, because I've read the referral, like as soon as I see that cocktail, I'm like, okay, this person has a trauma history. I don't need to know what the trauma is, but I know it's there, because these are the symptoms of trauma. This is how trauma manifests, right? So what I want to say to you particularly is, like, if you have a previous history of anxiety, PTSD, or depression, then it's more likely that you're going to really need to get back to your doctor. And if you had taken meds in the past, you might need to take meds again, particularly, like I say, if you have a historic diagnosis. But if you don't have a previous history of any of those things, maybe you've dappled with low mood, or maybe you've been anxious before a job interview. Well, those are all just normal things, right? Like, I don't want you to medicalize your grief or your feelings of sadness. Your grief and your sadness are totally legit. Like, you've lost a child. That's not, to me, people would say to me, oh, you're depressed. And I'd be like, I hate that. Like, I'm not depressed. I think depression is like, you don't know why you're upset. Anxiety too. It's like, I don't know why I'm so anxious. Well, you know why you're anxious. You know why you have these symptoms. It's because your child died. It's simple like that, right? It's also complicated like that. What do I do about it? Okay. So that's where I get excited, is because the research, right? Woo! The research says that self-compassion and mindfulness are the antidote. So self-compassion helps with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Boom. So you don't even have to tease it apart. You could be like, I think I'm anxious. I think I'm depressed. Maybe I got PTSD. But if I do self-compassion affirmations and make myself feel safe, I'm going to win. I don't even need to know what it is. If I do these things, it's like a panacea blanket for all those things. So I'm proactively protecting myself from that increased rate of mortality. That scares me. I don't like that. That's why I'm passionate about this. When I looked at that research, whoa, right? I was so surprised. And if not disgusted, that this is the state, right? And I couldn't find in the research, there was no research out there to help any clinicians to work with bereaved parents. In fact, when I was training for my master's degree and we got to grief and loss and all that, and I started talking about bereaved parents, people started crying. Not that they aren't welcome to cry, but just like this is, these are people who are now out there counseling people who are coming in who've lost a child, right? And they're like, wow, I don't even know if I could help someone who has that, right? So we scare people. We scare people because we are going through the thing that people are the most scared of, right? So I touched on it earlier, and I just want to say with respect to suicidality, it is normal for bereaved parents to feel suicidal. It's 100% normal. What's not normal is planning for your suicide. If active planning is like, if you're actively, that is the spot where you know that you need to press stop. And like I said earlier, go to the emergency room, call the suicide hotline, whatever it is. When you are actively planning, you are in trouble. Otherwise, if you're just like thinking about suicide like it's some kind of romance, right? It's like, oh, it would end things or whatever. There's a romantic way that we'll think about suicide, or like a habitual way that we'll think about it. But it's that like planning place that you need to be, whoa, right? And that's also why women end up in the hospital 3 times more likely than men in the first 3 years. I don't know if it's 3 times. I was trying to say 3 years. They're more likely to end up in the hospital in the first 3 years than men. I don't know if it's 3 times likely. Because of the suicide aspect, right? Because women start to feel suicidal, and suicidal will get you in the hospital because it's safe. Nobody wants to lose you, right? So I also want to talk about anxiety, PTSD, and depression related to how long it's been since your child passed, right? Like some people will get a diagnosis of PTSD 6 months after their child passed. And I'm skeptical in that way because from the perspective of the DSM-4 or 5 rather, I don't want to read it to you or get all nerdy technical. Actually, I do. I want to go grab my DSM right now and like read it to you word for word, but I'm not going to because I think I'm going to lose you if I do that. But that's the kind of nerd that I am, right? So I just want you to understand that at that 6-month mark, it's kind of controversial to be diagnosed with PTSD because PTSD is like, it's supposed to be more chronic and long-term than just at the 6-month mark. So there's, issues around that we could talk about professionally. But that's why I say like, it's hard for professionals to know, is it the anxiety? Is it the PTSD? Is it the depression? Is it the grief? They want to help you. So sometimes you need a label to help someone because you need a label to get them the medical insurance access, right? So they give you that label. Like there's all kinds of reasons why maybe that label is something that you need. But I just want you to sort of understand there's things you need to think about when you're getting these labels. And I also really want to encourage you all, like, if you are really feeling you're dealing acutely with this anxiety, PTSD, and depression, go and see a counselor if you can. If you have an EFAP, we call them EFAP here. It's like an Employee Family Assistance Program where you can get free counseling, or if you have some kind of access to counseling, then please do it. Just do it. Give yourself that opportunity to have the space to go in and really have a safe place to just be all about your grief. Okay? And also, if you want to go deeper on these, on these topics and look at it really with respect to like your timeline, where you're at, how long's it been, what's going on, this is what the 5-week workshop is going to be all about, right? Is people connecting and going deeper around where they're at so they can move forward and be happier, without letting go of your child, developing a really strong relationship with them on the other side. So here are some tips that I have for you for the anxiety, PTSD, and depression. All right, I got to take a drink. So thought stopping is something that you really need to get good at, right? And so thought stopping is recognizing those thoughts that are not healthy. And so I'll tell you right now, I can't cope. I will never get better. These sorts of thoughts are not healthy thoughts to be running through your brain, right? Another sort of thought pattern process that I want you to try and stop immediately is the what if thinking. I know you're doing it. Okay, it's the what if thinking that you do around the actual death, right? Who It's secret. It's secret. We think about this in secret, I think, right? I don't even think I've ever told anybody this. So, I mean, I did it. I don't know that you did it, but I suspect that you did, or that you do, or that you are, right? It's like that. What if, like, if this had happened and that had happened, then they wouldn't have died, right? What if I did this? What if I did that? What if this had happened? What if that had happened? Like, I, I seriously, almost feel embarrassed by like how crazy I got thinking like that. Like, it sent me into a really bad place, because of course you can't change the outcome. You just can't, like, but you want to, right? You want to. And that's that where it starts to become crazy making, because it's not healthy. Like, you can't change the outcome. And eventually your brain is going to come up against that in a way that's going to really hurt. So that's why I just want to encourage you as much as you can to stop this thought process immediately. The what ifs around the loss or the event, particularly around the event, right? What if Luther was alive? What if he was 15? What would he be like? I still don't allow myself to go into those what if thoughts, right? Because that's what hurts. That's what hurts. It's like, oh, what if it was my son who was graduating? What if it was my son who was getting married? What if it was my child? What if it was my grandchild? What would his wife be like? What would his job be like? Oh my God. So that is dangerous for bereaved parents. It's dangerous. You need to be able to thought stop that, right? Maybe sometime in the future, when you're like 15, 20 years past, you might be able to indulge in a little bit of that nostalgia. But I still even think at that point, dancing with what could be is very dangerous to our well-being. So tips for your anxiety, your PTSD, and your depression. So those were tips like what not to do, right? And this is the tip what to do. Self-compassion affirmations. Like I say, self-compassion is the secret, right? You're like, oh, Vanessa, that sounds stupid. It's not. It's self-talk in your brain that's going to combat all of these other things that you're telling yourself naturally, because you're in this trauma response. And the thing that the trauma response does, I haven't even gotten into it with you guys around trauma. Oh my God, right? But the trauma response cuts off the communication to your frontal lobes. So you can't access your higher thinking. And that's why I say you have to automatically say, no, I'm not doing that, because those what if, I can't cope, oh my God, those thoughts are like, they're a feedback loop in your brain that is resulting from the trauma. And so the thoughts, anyway, please, just trust me. I've studied this stuff. I know this stuff inside and out. I want to share it with you deeper in the 5-week workshop. I promise you, when you leave that workshop, you're going to be like, wow, I needed that information. Now I know how to deal with my anxiety. I understand what's causing it. Now I can come up with strategies to combat it. So, self-compassion affirmations, trust me, part of the strategy. Feeling your feelings, trust me, part of the strategy. So again, feeling your feelings is going to be different depending on where you're at in the timeline of your grief. And that's why I said to you at the beginning of this session that the timeline of where you're at with your grief is always going to be important, right? So, okay. So when you're feeling your feelings in the early stage, your feelings are real dark, right? And so you want to give yourself some space to be busy and to not always be constantly feeling your feelings. But you still do need to have space around your feelings. You can't not feel your feelings at all with your grief, right? It's just like, how much do I allow? And then for those of us that get further along in our grief, we stop feeling that acute grief, though we still feel that acute missing the person, right? And so when your feelings come later, when you're in the later years of your grief, it's really important to feel them then too, and not toss them aside, right? To really just embrace them at that point. Denying your feelings, avoiding your feelings, suppressing your feelings, these are not good things to do, okay? So what I want you to understand as well is that what you're going to do for your anxiety, your PTSD, and your depression is you're going to learn to hang on to your child and not the grief feelings associated with the loss, right? And again, that's a process, but this is just the tips, right? It's a start. Small things that you do create space for bigger things in the future. And I also want you to really be okay with not being okay, and just be your child. This is part of the self-compassion affirmations, right? It's like your child's passed away, right? You're not you're a superhero because you're in this category, but you need to be okay with not being okay, because this is something that's super huge that people fear and run scared from, and it's happening to you. So just be okay with not being okay and not knowing, and 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 allow that space for yourself, right? And also take good care of yourself daily, right? And that good daily care is going to look different again depending on where you're at with your grief. If you're in the early stages, take good care of yourself, drink water, eat, get outside, get exercise. If you're later in the stages of your grief, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, the way that you're taking care of yourself is going to look different. And so for me, part of how I take care of myself now is doing these workshops. Like I love this stuff. And that takes care of me, right? But I have to be able to be in the space to be able to do that. And that's why I keep harping where you're at in the timeline is going to influence, how you utilize these tips and strategies. So I love this quote. It says, "Can I see that I am okay just as I am, even though I feel broken and wish that things were different? Can I see that I am okay just as I am?" And that's from Matt Kahn, who I particularly like. So I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm rushing you guys. Like I'm getting closer and closer to the screen because I'm so excited. Okay. I love this. I love the sharing of the information because I feel like, man, this is so good. All of this stuff is so important. I want everyone to know, right? So I wanted to give you these ideas for self-compassion affirmations, right? I'm going through one of the most painful things an adult can go through. This is a time of suffering. Suffering is part of the experience of being human. I am not alone in my suffering. There is nothing wrong with how much I'm hurting. In fact, it is a normal response to a very difficult situation. It is okay not to be okay. So these are the thoughts that you want to combat those "I can't do this" thoughts, right? Those what if thoughts. You want to sort of switch it out and train your brain to think these thoughts. The neurons that wire together, right? So you want to create a break in that loop of those thoughts that are danger thoughts, anxiety thoughts, bias thoughts to keep you safe, right? And if you aren't understanding what I'm saying and all that, I want, like I say, I really want you to join me in this 5-week workshop because I want to go deeper and I really want to pick this apart for you so that you can understand that this trauma response that you're going through is super normal, and also understand like the way that you fix it. So things to remember in your suffering. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion I need. May I be safe. May I be strong. May I forgive myself. We get a lot of guilt around the loss of our child. May I learn to live with this incredible loss. May I learn a new way of being. May I always be connected to my child. So the last of our topics for this session are anniversaries and birthdays. So I want to say to you, like, these are sacred days for you now. These 2 days are sacred days. They're always going to be harder than regular days. And that's my experience 15 years later. Yesterday was the 15th anniversary of Luther's passing. It wasn't, it was, I did a session, webinar, whatever you want to call it. And it was fantastic. I was so happy to be able to do that. It just felt so great. And I worked my way through the day, but it was still a day, like a slow day of kind of like wishing that things were different. Or I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like that day is not my favorite day. But I do really work hard to plan ahead to make it so that something about that day is special for me. Another thing I want to say is like, what I find is that my body remembers the seasons around Luther's life, right? So he was born in February. And so in February, I start to feel sort of like that seasonal reminder of the birthday party that I never got to throw for him because he passed when he was 5 months old. So, and then in June, the body remembers. I have this story about that I like to tell about how when he was alive in June, I took him down the walk near our house, and there's just this pathway lined with wild roses. And I can still remember the smell of those wild roses, like was, and having him, and just like that whole feeling was so beautiful. And I can conjure that up now. But I think like this is 15 years later. And in the early years, I wasn't able to walk that rose path without it totally destroying me. So I stayed away from it. And then I think I allowed my brain the space to not attach the bad memory to the good smell, if that makes sense, right? So now I have the good memory of that smell, not memories of me like boo-hooing and crying when I'm smelling that smell. So anyway, just giving you an example of like how where you're at in the timeline of your grief really does impact the way that you experience different things. So like I say, I really recommend that you plan ahead to get through anniversaries and birthdays, and that you learn to create rituals. And I guess what I want to say about the rituals is like, I don't mean rituals in the sense that you do the same thing every year, but I mean like rituals in the sense that you're engaging with the day in a ritualistic way, right? Like honoring the fact that this is the birthday or the anniversary of the loss, and having some sort of intentional action that you're doing during the day. That is the ritual. It doesn't, you can be flexible in the way that you're having these rituals show up, right? Maybe one year you do this, one year you do that, but the ritual is the ritual way that you're engaging with the day. Even if that's like, you're isolating and you're doing things in that isolation that support you. So I don't want to encourage you to isolate and get drunk for either of these days. I know that that's something that that people will do, right? Like, let's be real. Self-medicating is a huge part of our experience, probably of being a bereaved parent for some people, and some people will go down the dark path that way with addiction after their child passes, because it can be a coping method, right? So when I say isolate if you need to, I think you also need to be real about whether it's healthy for you, and don't isolate if you're going to be engaging in self-harming behaviors like getting so drunk that you're hungover for the next 3 days or whatever. I'm not trying to discourage people from having their relationship with alcohol or, self-medicating, however. But I just really want to warn you that I think you set yourself up for feeling badly when you do that, because you're going to feel like your child's disappointed in you, and you want to engage with the day in a ritualistic way. I think that allows you to feel the love that your child has for you, if that makes sense. So here we go. Tips for anniversaries and birthdays. Like I said, preparation and planning are key. So these are just some ideas for you, and I hope that maybe they'll generate creative ideas for yourself that out of looking at these. So for anniversaries, you can pamper yourself with the spa or some candles and a bubble bath, or like a manicure and a pedicure, or a haircut, or something that makes your body feel good, right? You could go on a trip. Maybe you want to go on a trip of remembrance somewhere that you really wanted to go with your child, somewhere that you went with your child. Maybe you just want to visit their grave on that day and do something of a ritual there, or drop off flowers, or maybe you want to decorate their grave. I think it's nice, if you're going to spend time with someone, that you spend time with someone who gets it, who really understands. I've my fella who passed, after we'd been together for a couple of years, I took the risk of like being with him on the anniversary of Luther's passing one year, and he didn't really understand, and that made it hard. Like, he loved me enough that he didn't want to see me upset, that right? So he just wanted me to not be upset, and I couldn't not be upset. And then all of that guilt started to come up for me, and then I tried to explain to him how like I just needed him to be okay with me not being okay, and then he started anyway, that's not the way that you really want to spend the anniversary, right? But I still feel proud of myself because I took that risk to be vulnerable with him, and he appreciated that vulnerability, and it did help him to understand me a little bit more as a bereaved parent. But it's still, like I say, you want to maybe be sure that they get it before you spend the day with them, right? So I also think that for the anniversary, having a down day and just really allowing your grief is something that you can plan for as well. So birthdays. Some ideas for what to do on their birthday would be like decorating the grave is something super cool that I never would have thought of. I don't have a grave for Luther, and so I've seen that, and I just think it's brilliant. I also, I mean, what we do on Luther's birthday is we make a cake. It's a special angel food cake, and we make it for everybody's birthday. And it's like the traditional cake that I've always made for Luther's birthday. And now both of my boys always choose to have it on their birthday, which really touches me, right? Like, so some people love to have a special dinner, you know, maybe they invite people over who knew their child or were important. And that's really a great idea. Fireworks can be fun for a birthday or an anniversary, you know. Some people like to release balloons. I didn't put it on the list because it's controversial, right? Like it can be harmful for wildlife. So other things people will do is release bubbles. But the balloons are cool because you can write a message to heaven, right? And if you maybe get a biodegradable balloon, it seems like it's not so bad, but I've heard that it's all bad. So I'm not trying to stir up controversy here or recommend the balloons, but I know that that's something that people do, and I guess I want people to think about it from an environmental perspective as well. So birthdays, I think lighting candles is lovely, especially if it's your child's birthday in the wintertime. You know, you really get that like warm, loving kind of vibe, and candles are lovely for remembrance, especially there's a global remembrance day, right? Where we all light candles in remembrance of our lost child. And that always is something that I like to participate in too. I think on birthdays, something I've seen in our Facebook group is people will create like cool altars for their child for their birthday with like, you know, celebratory stuff like flowers or like helium balloons or I don't know, other kind of neat trinkets or statues or pictures or things that remind them of their child or their child's favorite food or whatever. And I think that's really super cool too. Like my son was 5 months old when he passed, and so it's different for me. I don't have like all of those wonderful memories that a lot of you have to draw from in terms of like when you're creating your rituals around how you want to remember your child. Like I don't have a lot of those memories. It's funny because my friends at the Compassionate Friends, they always used to say that they felt really bad for me because I didn't have those memories like they did, you know? And I used to actually feel really bad for them because of that, right? Like I would think, oh, I wonder if it's harder for them because of that, right? But because I long for those memories. Like I want to have those memories. So I guess they're right in the sense of feeling like, oh, I just wish I'd had more time with him, right? So I think I was often maybe a little envious of their time with their child, but I don't know if you can ever do that in a meeting where the ultimate result is that somebody's lost a child. So 5 tips for staying fabulous while you ride the waves of your grief. Because let's face it, we are all, you know, still expected to do the same things. Like life expects the same things of you. So I used to watch Tyra Banks. Do you remember that talk show? And she had a tip about how when she wasn't wearing makeup, she would wear sunglasses. And so I just morphed that tip into my own little tip because one time, well, many times I would end up crying in the grocery store or like out and about. So I learned that I needed to have these sunglasses because I could just put them on over top and then continue to shop while I was crying. Brilliant, right? So a big pair of sunglasses are your friend. And the other thing that I think can help you sort of stay fabulous is if you like to go to the spa, you know, just going to the spa with a good friend, you don't necessarily have to talk about your grief at all, but just going there and allowing yourself to be pampered and engaging in the services can be very lovely. Another thing that I think is super fun, it's like rocks and gems or jewelry of remembrance. You know, people buy rings, they get bling, like, you know, remembrance bling for our kids. I think that is super cool, right? Shirts, even hats, whatever, right? I like rocks and gems, so I get a lot of rocks and gems, and then I've created a really cool altar in my room, and I think it's fabulous. So another thing I think is really good is like when you get to that place, maybe some of you can relate to what I'm saying, where you maybe past the acute part where you're crying all the time, and and maybe you want to cry, but you don't really know how to get there. So that's the time when I like to recommend watching movies. And I've got a list of movies about bereaved parents that I circulate to my Facebook group. So another tip, I think, especially this tip is really important for those of you who are in the early days, is to stay busy. It helps to distract your mind from what you're going through. So that was a tip that my best friend, her mom, lost a daughter, a baby, before my best friend was born. The same friend who I told you the story about earlier, who I told to just leave me messages. Her mom, before she was born, lost a daughter, and so my best friend was the daughter that her mom had after she lost a baby. So anyways, I could just get into that more, but I won't right now. Her relationship with her mom is really interesting and unique, right? Because she's the baby after the baby that was lost, right? And her sisters are kind of jealous of her. But anyway, her mom, I had a conversation with her mom shortly after Luther died. And her mom's advice was, stay busy, because otherwise your mind is going to wreak havoc on you, right? And I think that was really sound advice for the early days. And I think as you get into the later stages, the 5, maybe the 10-year mark, I think it's dangerous to be too busy, because you really do at that point need to give your body a chance to acclimatize to the trauma. And the way that you acclimatize to the trauma is by not being busy, is by relaxing and being, anyways, that's sort of the antidote to the trauma, is that compassion, the stillness. Anyway, that stuff is stuff that I would love to dive deeper with you guys around, because it is really, really the stuff that works, once you get past the acute stage of your grief. There's different things that you do. So I've been talking a lot about the grief management 5-week workshop. So I've designed it because I want to help you learn to find peace faster, right? And my goal, like I said, my overarching goal always is to let people know and give people as much information as possible to make this easier, right? Because the statistics are brutal. And I am a social justice nut, right? And so from a social justice angle, the fact that it's okay that bereaved parents just kind of get marginalized, and that we have all of these statistical terrible outcomes really related with our grief, and that nobody really has any answers, particularly for us, just makes me so incensed. So this for me is like social justice passion. Like I feel so strongly about helping you guys, because I suffered alone for so long. Like I don't want to get into it because I feel like I would cry if I have to talk about it. It was just like, if you're in that place, it, right? Like you're so alone and so lost and nobody has any answers, but they're totally not, shy about letting you know that you need to get your shit together, right? I think at one point that was what my ex-husband, who took us a while for our relationship to dissolve, right? But at one point, maybe at the 3-year mark, he said to me, you need to get it together or I'm going to divorce you. What? Like, oh my God, I still feel hurt over that. And I think like at the root of it with my divorce, in a personal way I can share with you, is like, he doesn't like who I am anymore. And I couldn't be who he wanted me to be. And that is super hard to digest, right? So yeah, I don't want other people to be alone in their experience the way that I was. I want people to have the resources, to save their marriages, to save their relationships, to save themselves, right? Like, I don't necessarily know that I could have saved my marriage, but maybe if I'd had, something that I could concrete to show my husband that, like, I'm not doing so bad here. Like, this is the path. This is what happens to us, right? And maybe it would have helped him to be able to normalize his experience as well, right? And that's why I say I'm just so passionate about it. I mean, I co-parent in a really peaceful way with my ex-husband now, and we focus on the kids, and we're still a family, and it's all really beautiful. But anyways, like I say, I'm super passionate about helping people to know the path. And that conversation that I had with my colleague at work made me even more sure that knowing knowing how to deal with this grief that we have, and having an idea and support around figuring it out is the answer to finding peace more quickly. So beyond the 5-week workshop meetings, I'm going to include in the course 2 guided meditations. One's to connect with your child, and another is to help you sleep. So the guided meditation to connect with your child we'll actually do together in the workshop, because I don't want to just give it to you, and I want to do it with you to see how it lands. I don't want anybody to be stirred up in a trauma way over anything that we do in the workshop. So I want to make sure we do stuff like that together so that we can really talk about it, right? And I also, for all of the people who enroll in my workshop, will give you a free copy of my book via email, because I want people to know that I've been there, and I want them to be able to really understand my story without me having to tell it again and again. So, and I'm also working right now on an extra module. And if people are interested in on parenting after the loss of a child, I did quite a lot of research. And so it turns out that there's different techniques that you want to use depending on the age of your child, related to their grief experience. And so I wanted to just let you guys know that that's something that I'm really passionately working on as well. And so I have these, I don't know if you can see this on my arm. I love these temporary tattoos. This one says be present, and this one says be you. And so I just wanted to offer people for fun, the first 5 people to enroll on my list, on my wait list, I'm going to send you out a pack of really lovely, awesome affirmation tattoos. I'm going to grab them right now so you can see how cool they are. So this is this one says love, and then here are the tattoos. They're so cool. And then this one says fly, and it's got like feathers and angel wings and sayings and butterflies of transformation. So if you're into that kind of stuff like I am. As a thank you for letting me know that you're interested, and for helping me to sort of fine tune the topics for the workshop, I just want to say thank you. Because really, when I put together the workshop, I want it to speak to you, the people who are participating in the workshop each time, because I feel like that's the beauty of the group, is what the group brings together, and the synergy of the group and what we have to offer each other, and the connection and the support. So that was one thing I learned when I did my master's degree. I did it online, and I made some really amazing connections with the people who were in my class through our interactive webinars. And I'm still in contact with them. They're so neat, supportive, positive. I'm so happy to know them. And I thought to myself, yeah, Vanessa, that's what we need as bereaved parents, is that web of support, the web of support of people who make us feel seen, who understand where we're at. So I want to offer you that opportunity, to learn about the pathway, but then also to gather some people to walk the path with you in a loving way. So I want to let you know about the price of the workshop. It's not going to change. This is the price. The Grief Management Workshop, 5 weeks. It's going to be 333 Canadian dollars. It includes the 5 interactive group sessions, which are 1 hour of content and then a 30-minute Q&A, the meditation to connect with your child, which we're going to do together because I don't want anybody to be traumatized doing anything alone, the meditation to help with your sleep. I'm going to give you a digital copy of my book. I'm working on 1 extra module for parenting after the loss of a child, and I want to have the first 5 people enjoy the affirmation tattoos that I just showed you. So we're working our way. That was the end that we're working. This is my last slide. And I want to just say to you, be the unicorn, be that person who knows what they're doing. And this is my lovely slide with my girlfriend. She's the unicorn, and there I am. I could be the butterflies or the fairy, whatever. I just love that picture. It looks to me like peaceful, soothing, magical. And that's how I like to envision my life can be: peaceful, soothing, magical, wonderful, right? It doesn't have to be laced with tragedy because I've lost my child. So I hope that this grief management session was super helpful for you. I really do. And I want to, I hope that you have learned that you too can find peace, and that some of the tips and strategies that I shared with you are things that you can implement right away, small things to get yourself down that path a little further. And I just want to encourage you to know that, in your own time and in your own way, whenever you're ready, I am going to keep offering these 5-week workshops to people, because I just am so passionate about helping bereaved parents to find their way when they're ready. So that's why, like I say, I've got the wait list so that I can gather groups of people together and really offer a lovely group experience where people can connect and learn and join hands, to know that we're not alone, because I think that's the hardest thing is the feeling that we're so alone with it. So thank you so much for watching this, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge and my information. I'm so grateful to just be able to present this webinar like this, or this grief management session, as I call it. Thank you again so much. I'm going to end the session, and you can join the waitlist via email. So you won't be watching this webinar if you aren't on my email list. So you just respond to any of the emails that I send out to you and say, "Hey, Vanessa, sign me up for the next workshop. I'm super keen. I'm interested." And then you'll be in. All right. So you know how to find me in the Facebook group Support for Bereaved Parents. And then you can also find me on my YouTube channel, The Wellbeing Being. And I post videos there and then send them out to the email list. So looking forward to seeing you soon. All right. Take good care. And here we go. I'm going to try and end the meeting if I can. Save those changes. Yes, please. Why can't I end this meeting? There we go. End the meeting. Okay. Thanks, everybody. It's like a goofball here. Okay. End the meeting for all. I'm doing